In this video, we're continuing the Standard Descriptive Characteristics series. There are 8 standard descriptive characteristics for each motion, and in this video, we will be covering the last characteristic on the list, known as reconsider, which tells us whether or not the motion we looked up can be reconsidered. Reconsider is one of the most complicated and most interesting motions in parliamentary law. While other motions trace their roots back thousands of years, reconsider is a fairly new motion with its origins rooted in America. The purpose of the motion known as reconsider is to undo the vote on a particular motion so that motion can come again before the Assembly for further consideration, allowing the motion to be decided by a new vote. Now, we're not going to delve into the specifics of the motion reconsider. We will cover that in detail in another video. For the purposes of this video, it is important to understand that some motions can be reconsidered and some cannot, while other motions can be reconsidered under some circumstances but cannot be reconsidered under other circumstances. So how do we know whether a motion can be reconsidered? Well, if you've watched the other videos in this series, you know that we're going to use the standard descriptive characteristics. As a refresher, each section of Robert's Rules of Order newly revised 12th edition, from section 10 through section 37, covers a specific motion or set of motions, and each of these sections contains a list of standard descriptive characteristics specific to that motion or set of motions. And this list can be found within the first few paragraphs of each of these sections. For example, if we wanted to know whether an amendment could be reconsidered, we would open Robert's Rules of Order newly revised 12th edition, and we would flip to the section on Amendment, which is section 12. Turning one page, we would find the Standard Descriptive Characteristics heading in paragraph 7, and scrolling down to the 8th entry, we would see that it says, "can be reconsidered." So what does that mean? Well, it means that after the vote has been taken on an amendment, it is in order to reconsider that vote. For example, let's say a motion is pending that the annual President's Dinner shall be held at the Ritz-Carlton. And let's say a member makes a motion to amend by adding the words "on February 14th. Let's then say the amendment is put to a vote and adopted, so that the pending motion now reads that the annual President's Dinner shall be held at the Ritz-Carlton on February 14th. Then let's say a member realizes that February 14th is Valentine's Day, and that many members might have other, more romantic plans for that day. So it would be in order to reconsider the vote on the amendment. If the motion reconsider is properly made and adopted by a majority vote, the effect would be that the vote adopting the amendment would be magically undone, and the amendment would be again before the Assembly for consideration, as though the first vote had never happened. At that point, a secondary amendment could be made to strike out 14th and insert perhaps 7th or 21st. Now, I want to bring up the motion rescind at this time, because rescind and reconsider are often confused with one another. They are definitely not the same motion. While there are many subtle differences between them, 2 essential differences stand out. First, rescind can only be applied to a motion that has been adopted. It has no bearing on a motion that was lost. While the motion to reconsider can, in many situations, be applied to a motion that was adopted or to a motion that was lost. Second, the motion to rescind can only be applied to an adopted main motion. Rescind cannot be applied to privileged motions, such as the privileged motion to recess, and it cannot be applied to subsidiary motions, such as the motion to amend or the subsidiary motions to commit or postpone. On the other hand, the reason reconsider shows up as an entry in the standard descriptive characteristics is that many different motions can be reconsidered. To explore all the differences between rescind and reconsider, we will have separate videos dedicated to each of these motions. But for this video, we are concerned with quickly and easily finding out whether any particular motion can be reconsidered. Now, with the amendment that we just covered, we saw an example of a motion that simply can be reconsidered. For another very simple example, if we flip to the section on recess, which is section 20, we can turn one page to find the standard descriptive characteristics for that motion. And if we scroll down to the bottom of the list, we see that standard descriptive characteristic number 8 tells us that the motion to recess cannot be reconsidered. So now we've seen can be reconsidered and cannot be reconsidered. What other options could there be? Well, for an example, let's open Robert's Rules of Order newly revised 12th edition and look up discharge a committee, which is the motion that's used when a matter has been referred to a committee and the Assembly wishes to take that matter out of the hands of that committee. If we turn one page, we see the standard descriptive characteristics in paragraph 4. Scanning down to standard descriptive characteristic number 8, we see that it says, a negative vote can be reconsidered, but not an affirmative vote. This is a very common theme. For example, let's say at the May meeting a motion was pending that $1,000 shall be donated to the ABC Foundation. And let's say during its consideration it was referred to the Finance Committee with instructions to report its recommendations at the September meeting. Now let's say that at the June meeting the Assembly doesn't want to wait until September and instead decides to take the matter out of the committee's hands by adopting a motion to discharge the committee from the consideration of the motion. At that point, the motion that $1,000 shall be donated to the ABC Foundation comes before the Assembly to decide. Then, let's say after a bit of debate, a member obtains the floor and says, I move to reconsider the vote on the motion to discharge the committee. The chair would have to rule this motion out of order, since an affirmative vote on the motion to discharge a committee cannot be reconsidered. If the Assembly wanted to send the motion back to the committee, the motion to recommit would be used, instead of the motion to reconsider. On the other hand, let's say the motion to discharge the committee had been lost. And let's say that later in the meeting, a member makes a motion to reconsider the vote on the motion to discharge the committee. That motion would be in order because a negative vote on the motion to discharge a committee can be reconsidered. Now, the motion to reconsider the vote would have to be made by someone who voted on the prevailing side during the initial vote on the motion to discharge the committee, but we'll get into all those details in another video. Our focus here is to make sure that we can find the information in standard descriptive characteristic number 8 and to make sure that we understand what we find there. That's why it's important to know that in many cases we will see that a negative vote can be reconsidered, but not an affirmative vote. If we turn to the tinted pages in the back of Robert's Rules of Order newly revised, 12th edition, to the Table of Rules relating to motions, where the main motion is listed first, with the other motions below it in alphabetical order, we can look to the column under the heading Can Be Reconsidered to see whether a particular motion can be reconsidered. Here we find some yeses, some noes, and the very common negative vote only. Now, to be clear, if this says yes, it means any vote on that particular motion can be reconsidered, whether the motion was adopted or lost. And if it says no, it means no vote on the motion can be reconsidered, regardless of whether it was adopted or lost. And of course, when it says negative vote only, it means that an affirmative vote on that particular motion is not subject to reconsideration, but a negative vote can be reconsidered. If we flip to the motion to postpone indefinitely, which proposes to kill the main motion for the remainder of the session without taking a direct vote on the main motion itself, we see a unique entry. Under the column of Can Be Reconsidered, this is the only motion where you will find the entry Affirmative Vote Only. Another handy resource that we have for quickly gaining information about which motions can be reconsidered is located in the back of the tinted pages, at pages T50 and T51. Here we see several lists of motions whose consideration is prohibited or limited. First, there's a list of motions that cannot be reconsidered at all. Then, and I don't know if it can be called a list because it only contains one entry, but here we see the motion for which a negative vote cannot be reconsidered, although an affirmative vote can be, which of course is the motion to postpone indefinitely, as we just saw. Then there's a list of motions for which an affirmative vote cannot be reconsidered, although a negative vote can be. Before we end this video, we should cover another concept that you will encounter with standard descriptive characteristic number 8. That is that some motions can be reconsidered only for a certain time. For an example, if we look at the motion Limit or Extend Limits of Debate, we see that standard descriptive characteristic number 8 says, a negative vote on the motion to limit or extend limits of debate can be reconsidered only until such time as progress in business or debate has been sufficient to make it essentially a new question. Thereafter, the motion can be renewed. The concept here is pretty simple. If a motion can be renewed, there's no reason to reconsider the vote on a former version of that motion. So, if a motion to limit debate is lost, meaning that it was voted down, Technically, that vote can be reconsidered, but after sufficient progress in business or debate, the motion to limit debate could simply be made again, and at that point, it would not be in order to reconsider any previously defeated motion to limit debate, since a member could more easily just make a new motion to limit debate. That covers standard descriptive characteristic number 8, which tells us whether a particular motion can be reconsidered.